Welcome to the What's Your Revolution show. A show for men and the people who love them. We discuss how men can find and embrace the revolution within themselves. Where people can find and embrace the revolution within themselves. I am your host, Dr. Charles Corprew. As we always say, what's good, revolutionaries? I hope all is well. And that you're finding your community and that you're doing your thing with your people. I won't go through my usual diatribe because I want to dig down deep into what I just said. Finding your people and being in community. And if you remember last year, revolutionaries, I got this auspicious invite to come on the Trailblazer FM show with this luminary that we're going to have today as my guest, Stephen A. Hart. And he brought me on to talk, really understand what we are doing with What's Your Revolution and why you are here with us, fulfilling what we think is the most thought-provoking question of your life. He and our good friend, our mutual good friend, Sean Dove, who we have tremendous affection to. And Sean, thank you for being an ardent supporter of not only of Stephen, but mine as well. And he was able to bring us together. And that day, for some reason, Stephen, Sean, and I put together something, as my friends would call it. They said, "You've got it. You've hit your moment." It was on that show, on the Trailblazer.fm show, which is now I Am Black Success, where I was able to flourish and really, really tell the best story about what your revolution is. And I've been dying to have this brother on, to thank him and bring him on so you can hear who Stephen A. Hart is. Personal branding extraordinaire, superior, revolutionary than himself, but the host of I Am Black Success, who has been interviewing just the most amazing revolutionaries that we can find across the diaspora to tell their stories of how they are moving themselves and moving their communities into a better space. So, like I said, we're going to just jump in and say, Stephen A. Hart, my dear brother, my friend, and look, we got to see each other at the recording of this show in Denver at Podcast Movement. We have been talking at length, but we had never met each other, and the embrace that we had, it was like homecoming. It was like two old friends. So what's good, brother? How are you?
I am great, brother. I appreciate that introduction. Like I was saying to you last week, we should have had a H6. We should have had a recorder right there, yes, capturing the conversations that we shared in last week. But it was great to finally meet you in person, and share as creators that space at Podcast Movement.
Yeah, it is. And everybody was like, I showed some pictures. Like, is that your brother? I was like,
we sure look like brothers in that picture, man.
Yeah, I was like, I wish he's the younger version. I would be the older brother in this. He don't got no gray. You know what I'm saying?
There's some fuzz coming in now, man.
Hey, own it. Look, I always like to just begin this question. I'm gonna get to our signature question in a second, but we don't ask this question often to each other, but how are you?
I am blessed. There is a lot that has challenged me in the past 6 weeks that surprised me in this season. And there's so much that I'm extremely grateful for in this season. As I'm talking to you, I am coming through a day where I'd opened up about and been a bit vulnerable earlier today across social about the journey I've been on over the last 6 weeks, where I walked into an annual physical at now 46 years old.
Yeah.
Thinking, hey, I'm in great health. I'm in great shape and checking a lot of boxes, and realizing that not everything was great. And so spent the last, I'd say the last 6 weeks, just really focusing inward even more.
Yeah.
really looking at what I might have thought was good and vetting that, hey, you know what? There's a lot that I need to peel back. There's a lot of work stress impacting my health. There was a lot of things that I could control even more, namely my diets. A lot of us as Black men, right? We'll go work out, we'll hit the gym, we'll go for a run. But, you know, especially as a Jamaican, I've actually been getting a lot of Jamaican people saying, hey, I don't know if, you know, you need to earn back your Jamaican badge if you're going to stop eating rice and peas and you're going to stop eating hard-o bread, right?
Yeah.
And your beef patties. But hey, you know, that the sides of my parents, the hereditary elements of the health play coming home, you know, and just when you ask me how I'm doing, those are things that I'm looking at right now. I'm looking through the lens of, hey, you know, how do I start to make some long-term adjustments to make sure I'm here for the long term? Because as a dear friend said, Charles, I have 2 weddings to attend. You know, for everyone listening, I have 2 young crumb snatchers. I have a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I want to be around for them for the long haul. So doing all I can right now, brother, to take care of me in the mental and the physical, and on all fronts.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, you know, when we think about longevity. And when we think about longevity for folks that look like you, they look like you and me. And they look like you and me, knowing the statistics, you know, and who thinks that two prominent podcasters are going to get on a conversation and begin to talk about health. But it's important. I think it's important because when you're in spaces and doing the things that you and I do, and you have elevated status, you're a husband and you're a father, you're an executive, a high-level executive, you have this wonderful, wonderful podcast that's impacting folks. And sometimes you don't realize all the things that you're doing at one time. And it is in those conversations, Stephen, that I never realized that when I start to list the litany of things that I'm doing, I'm like, I am doing all of this at one time. And that we can forget to eat, to take the medicines,
to
sleep, right? And how prominent sleep is, as you're saying, in our longevity. And then when you think you're feeling good, and I've been talking to Dr. Batts, my recurring guest, about who's a cardiologist, one of the most prominent cardiologists in the country, is that high blood pressure is the silent killer. That we are, you know, we look good, we look in the mirror, we look good, we feel good, but our blood vessels are working too hard. Our heart is working too hard. And so I appreciate you saying to the listeners is that to revolt and evolve, you have to look inward. Yeah. You have to look inward with yourself, and that longevity, if the revolution is I want to live a life that is going to allow me to see my children be partnered and to hopefully provide grandchildren, right? So I can continue to be a beacon of light for them. What do I have to do now? What are those things that I have to do now that I can show up for my wife and partner? You know, because as Kishana Palmer said, you know, when we think about our health, you know, that is showing our partner love if we are thinking about and we're taking care of our own health, because we know as we get down the road, as we age, caregiving becomes one of the biggest stressors of life. How do I take care of my partner? So how do we show love to them by taking care of ourselves now?
Yeah, absolutely. And and for the brothers listening in, because I shared that very openly today. It's very vulnerable in a social media post, and there's so many DMs and text messages that came my way following it. There are a lot of brothers, man, that hit me back and said, look, I in a similar boat, and I chose to ignore what my doctor was telling me, and it continued the blood pressure issues, continued to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Hey, look, stop. No reason for us to be stubborn about it, right? Immediately, because look, they put me on BP meds, and I think I was sharing with you.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, it was still high.
Yeah. Tell
And
that story. Tell that story.
I walk in to my annual physical. My BP readings were high, and a lot of times I walk in and the white coat, right?
Yeah, got that myself.
High. So, and he's like, all right, let's wait. Let's see, how this adjusts. Going, 30 minutes in, it's still high. So he prescribed, a drug, Lisinopril. And a couple weeks later, I was traveling, having some back pains, and just decided before my follow-up with my primary to see if this drug was working. I walk into urgent care to get some muscle relaxers for back pain. My BP is now like 170 over 111.
Oof.
And let's say my primary isn't a black man. But the doctor in urgent care was. And he said, hey, this drug doesn't always work on black and brown people. Your BP is still very high. You might want to consider a calcium blocker. And Charles, I walked back into a primary, and we had a discussion, and I did go on a calcium blocker, and it did begin to lower it, a week and some later. But just to kind of make sure I was on the right path, because I was kind of concerned about my primary not being 100% on what I'd heard this other narrative, this other doctor sharing. Went and saw another black man, third doctor, and he echoed the exact same sentiment and said, hey, us black and brown men sometimes don't respond to, that particular drug.
Yeah.
And almost exact same narrative. It's like, hey, you may need a calcium blocker. And the blessing in it, it started to work.
Yeah.
But while I didn't wait for the drug to, start doing what it needed to do, I came home following that second visit and said, there's a lot that I can control. And I need to make that shift for my wife, for my family, for myself. I woke up the morning after, and I said, today is going to be day one. Now, one day I will. Today I will.
Love it.
Today I will begin to do an intermittent fast. And I'm going to teach my body to consume between 12 and 8. Today I will pause on caffeine. No soda, no coffee for a little bit. Today I will, what we touched on earlier, no rice, no bread, no pasta for a little bit. And just made a decision to consume fruits, greens, meat.
Yeah.
In the space of 1 month, Charles, I've shed 16, 17 pounds. No. A year, December of last year to the summer of this year, I'd been lifting and doing cardio 3-4 times a week. In a 6-month window, struggled to lose 10 pounds.
Wow.
Hadn't been addressing the diet.
Yeah.
In the space of 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Making those diet shifts.
Yeah.
and that weight just came right off.
Yeah. Yeah. What they say, abs are built in the kitchen.
Ain't no lie, man. But that's some of the things that I did in addition to the medication. I've seen the results and feeling a lot better. In addition to, I'm walking.
Yeah.
I'm walking. I'm getting up in the morning. I'd battled with anxiety and depression 3 years ago. When I was caretaking for my own dad.
Yeah.
And I found that anxiety, right, is us projecting a future what if scenario, and oftentimes won't ever exist, right? We're projecting that into our future. And so to put myself in the present, I'd go walk and go hug a tree.
Yeah.
Right? And it would bring me right into the present moment and remove the what if that I was living in. And so now, in the chaos of all that, of course, the anxiety starts, what if? And so I was like, you know what? Every morning I'm going to get up. I'll just go for a walk. And for the last month, been getting up most mornings by 7 a.m. Just grabbing my AirPods, listening to great podcasts like this one, and taking a 3-mile walk.
Yes.
And it's been so tremendously helpful.
Yeah. Brother, I thank you for sharing that story, because our listeners are a cadre of different folks who are taking on life like you and I are. And they're strivers, they're movers and shakers. And to pull back the veil of our lives and to see where we need to fix it, is one thing. But the other thing is to say, when I am fixing this, when I am fulfilling this revolution, that somebody else is watching this, right? That somebody else is going to see this, what you just said, when we post this on YouTube or wherever, they're going to see this and say, wait, Stephen's going through this revolution of himself, and look at him. He lost 16 pounds. He's walking. He's taking care of it. He's overcoming anxiety. Wait a minute. He can do it. So can I. And that is a beautiful thing for us to hear and see. One, to admit that I'm not a superhero. I'm not perfect. I got things going on. I've got the frailties of life, but I am still going to move forward because my health is, I can't do what I want to do in the world if I am unhealthy.
If I'm not here.
If you're not here. I walked out. I went to see my orthopedist yesterday, and I walked out, and there was this gentleman sitting, and I was like, "What's up, brother? How are you?" He said, "Am I breathing?" And I was like, "Yeah, if you're talking." If you're talking. And he said, then I'm doing all right.
And those are the things we have to be grateful for, right?
Yes. Yeah, those are the things that we have to be grateful for. So I appreciate it. And I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that story because, we talked about it at a length as we had launched the podcast movement. I wanted to talk a little bit before we jump in. Like, my folks hear that beautiful Jamaican accent.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I had Wayne Dawson on the show, who's also Jamaican, wonderful.
Big ups to my
coach.
brother Wayne.
Yeah, Wayne is an amazing. That show, Wayne Dawson, I love. You've got to activate. Yeah, I love Wayne. But just tell us a little bit. Who is Stephen A. Hart?
Yeah, born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica. Son of a chef and creative genius. I can cook, not like him. But the blessing is a lot of who I am today is fueled by his, DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For him, he has, created primarily through food, and done 1,000 weddings over 40 years, right? I mean, thousands and thousands of brides. But he's equally talented. Charles is a florist, as a decorator, as a playwright, as an actor. For me, growing up, all those creative elements, poured into me, spun up into what you see today, right?
Yeah.
And my creative elements of podcasting and all the other things that I do. I was actually a child actor for a little bit, yeah. And now I run from this stage, but but grew up in Jamaica, left when I was 16, and I've been in the States for 30 years now.
Wow.
Moved here in 93. Somebody who's just never been, the entrepreneurial gene of my dad again. I've just never really been content with one, driving in one lane, right? Came out of college knowing that I wanted to pursue more. And in the space of 3 years out of college, probably had 12 jobs. I did everything. I did everything from selling retail to life insurance to collections door to door to you name it. I've probably touched it.
Yeah.
Eventually found an anchor in sales and marketing.
Yeah.
And over the last 20 years, that's grown. And so today, my 9 to 5, I head up content marketing for the world's largest cybersecurity training firm. And content for me, I lean to the new media elements in video and podcasting and live content.
Mm-hmm.
And many people that are around me in my work world tend to refer to me as a live stream machine. Because I took the element of live stream in the season of my dad suffering 2 strokes and me not being able to create through the podcast.
Yeah.
And produced a few hundred live streams for myself and for the company I work for. So I've now created probably 400 or 500 live streams at this point.
Right.
And as you shared earlier, almost 8 years ago, after being a serial entrepreneur, creating, selling a business, and coming back to corporate to just be a good husband and provide for 2 young kids, I one day stood in my daughter's daycare, looking to the left and right, seeing accomplished Black couples. I live in a really awesome area in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Yeah.
Where there are so many progressive Black couples, right? Black families. And I thought to myself, well, isn't this something? Turn on the television and the shows that this child will watch will tell her that she can be a musician or an athlete.
Mm-hmm. Tell that story. Yes.
But it doesn't tell her representation of Black success in all its forms. And I wanted her to see so much more possibilities for her. And that was in the words of Sean Dove, the mission fuel.
Yeah, there it is. The mission fuel.
The mission fuel for me, starting what was then Trailblazers.fm on February 1st, 2016. And I've since been blessed to interview over 300 amazing Black success stories. Men, women in every occupation, in every industry, in many different countries around the globe. And that's been a blessing to me in so many ways, to move from past ventures that I'd taken up that were focused solely on money and one such, story, the business I told you I started and sold.
Yeah.
I was in my mid-20s thinking that, the sole mission, the vision for my life before I turned 30 was to become a millionaire. That I did. In my 30th year.
There we go.
And that I lost.
Oh, wow.
In my 30th year. And I found myself 6 months before my wedding, a millionaire, promising my then fiance a $1 million brownstone, having a $100,000 wedding in Jamaica, followed by a very expensive honeymoon cruise in Tahiti, coming home to realize that it all went belly up in the summer of 2008, in the middle of that financial crisis. And I went from being 7 figures up to 6 figures down. Weeks into a marriage.
Oof.
And saying, hey, about that brownstone, I'm gonna need you to pay the rent till I figure this out.
Wow.
And I'm here to tell you, we just celebrated 15 years of marriage. And she never walked out. And I tell her every day, she could have chose to be like, yo, I didn't sign up for this. I'm a hand this back to you and bounce. But she stuck with me.
Right.
And I'm trying to give her that ROI now.
Yeah. You ain't lying. So I know the revolutionaries are in my ear like, wait, we want to hear a little bit of this story about being up $1 million and then down a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
Like, can you give us the cliff notes of that? Because I mean, I think it's important to know, like you said, I'm 30. I just sold a company. I'm a millionaire.
I didn't sell the company at the time. No. So, I was running a company. I was running a trading advisory, and, we had invested in other funds. And there was another fund that we made a pretty large investment in. And the head trader of that fund was embezzling money. And that cost us several $1 million.
Oh, wow.
And the hit to that took us below a threshold that we had promised our investors.
Yeah.
That if we had gotten to that level, we'd fold. And we had to go, and it went below kind of that threshold. And so we had to cut, into our assets to make investors whole. And by the time we had done that, it put us in the red.
Yeah.
And
that's tough,
we were able to, we dissolved and we were in debt. We did reboot in a different structure and worked to rebuild a business. I spent the next 2 years putting in, 16 to 18 hour days, 7 days a week, rebuilding the structure. So I realized that, there were things about that, and it was a business partnership that weren't healthy, that, we didn't align in our vision, what we wanted. And I got a couple years out where things were starting to rebound, and I realized I was going right back to what was, and that wasn't who I was or what I'd wanted for me for the long term. It was a very difficult decision to say, you know what, I'm going to walk away and start over.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot and I'm going to let go and, start a new chapter.
Yeah. Revolt and evolve, man. And
that was a really challenging season of life, because I'd walked away from also 7 years of being an entrepreneur at that point to go back to work for someone else.
Yeah.
And, the evolution of Stephen A. Hart at that point, right? There's a lot of humility, right? Going from, right, what I told you, the peak to now selling the business, purchasing a home, starting a family, supporting a family, trying to support a family.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were darker days ahead, right?
Yes.
That,
Yes.
I went through and, it set the stage for a lot of good things, right?
Yeah.
I think by way of those experiences, we both realize, hey, you know what? We're in it for the long term.
Yeah.
Let's approach money differently. Let's be intentional about the future we want to create for our kids. And early on in that darkest of dark valley, we said, hey, we're going to clear our debts and we're going to save and we're going to invest. And we don't owe nobody no money no more.
Yeah.
And, we're very deliberate about saving aggressively.
Yeah.
And investing for our kids, for our retirement. And, I don't know if that would be the life that I would, had I not gone through some of that, right? I'd be the person I am today.
Yeah. I think the struggle, we talk about all the time here on the show about sitting in the discomfort, and that struggle can lead to revolution in our lives. That it is the impetus, it is the push, it is the catalyst, it is the cliff in front of us sometimes, that we got to walk somewhere. We've got to walk differently. We've got to do different things. It pushes us into the next phase of our life. And listening to that story, it's a story of resilience. And I would bet that story of resilience is also embedded in your DNA from your father.
It 100% is, because, and I've said it to people and they're like, whoa, careful how you say that. But I genuinely will tell you that man's legacy, when he leaves this earth, I have yet to see somebody who's given of themselves in a way that my dad has lived and gived. Like, he should be a multi-millionaire. But like his wealth was in the left hand, giving to anybody that was in need.
Yeah.
And the right hand don't know. Like, he wasn't telling nobody, right? He didn't need the accolades. He didn't need the recognition. Like, it was just in him to, I can't tell you, Charles, how many times I'd purchased my dad a really nice suit for an event. And I'd come back to Jamaica a year later and we'd go somewhere and I'd see some brother on the side of the hill
wearing the suit.
Yeah. Right. But too, I will say Trailblazers wouldn't be what Trailblazers is, because, I talked to you about my vision going into my 30s was solely focused on the material. And today it is what we talked about at the top of this call. It's focused on the impact.
Yeah.
Right. It's focused on the legacy I live and leave. And it doesn't really have to do with the monetary. I can't bring that with me.
The beauty of Trailblazers is that, like you said, you walked into your child's school and saw all of these prominent, successful, beautiful Black folks. One, with their children, but two, also quietly showcasing that there's a cadre, there's a cadre of success that may not be illuminated. And oftentimes as entrepreneurs, what do? We fill gaps. Right? We fill a space. We give people an opportunity to see and hear things that they may never have seen before. You've been doing this for, 16? This is 7 years. 7 years. And people are flocking to, they're flocking because they want to tell their stories on I Am Black Success now. After 7 years, what are some of the themes that you have been able to distill with all of these conversations that my revolutionaries might be able to take away when they're thinking about building success for themselves, their communities, and the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's actually been the fuel for courseware I've developed by way of seeing those common threads, that have come through the show and the content. At the core, one of the things that is most commonly seen amongst those success stories that I've highlighted, so many of them have designed a future that they wanted to live, right? They were clear about their purpose, about their vision, about the goals that they wanted to achieve. And look, so many of us write down a vision. We create this amazing vision board. But the difference with these people is that, that vision is so clear that North Star is ahead of them. And, when they run into the roadblocks of life, they keep their foot on the gas and keep going. Yeah. Right. And I could play clip after clip after clip of people who said, I just kept going. Right. And why they kept going? Because they had clarity in what it was that they were trying to pursue, and they understood why it was important to not stop until they achieved that vision, right, for themselves. And the other side of it is understanding who you're trying to serve.
Yeah.
Right. As a marketer, I get that. Right. Developing content, developing, a campaign to promote a product, I need to know who I'm speaking to. And those people definitely know who they're trying to serve, who they're trying to impact. And lastly, I would tell you, they understood what they were going to pursue. They had tremendous focus. I love to, I don't know if you've heard the analogy for focus, follow one course until success.
Oh, no, that's the first time I've ever heard at 52. I've never heard that before. Follow one course until success. Oh, that would be the mantra for the rest of my life.
But, you and I were creators.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs. And so, all too well, you're going to wake up one day and the shiny light of this new idea comes to mind. And in my 20s, it'd be a 360, right? This is all I'm going to focus in on now. And then 3 months later, it's another shiny light. You could never focus on one thing long enough.
Yeah.
Right. And look, we need to get really clear. I like to, now I teach students of my courseware. Look, list all the things you want to accomplish.
Right.
Inventory all the things. But when you inventory all the things, you got to know prioritize what you're going to pursue.
Yeah.
Right. And that becomes, what you can't prioritize more than 3 things at a time. Right. You can have a list of all the things you want to accomplish, but there is research that tells you can't prioritize more than 3 of those top things that you want to accomplish at a time, right? Or it becomes noise. You get nothing done.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the top things, man, when you talk about, the success stories that I've seen. That's the running, those things run through every man, woman, entrepreneur, leader, creator that I've spoken to who have succeeded.
Yeah.
Those are just a few of the things that, I've seen that run through all of them.
Yeah. I love that. A revolution is, it is an interesting thing that when you have the ability to then historically do a deep dive to distill down those characteristics. It's so key to see when you have qualitative research,
mm-hmm.
and then be able to produce that and give that out to folks who really want to truly be successful. That's the beauty of I Am Black Success, right? And I love the rebranding from the rebrander, from the branded. You think about this. This is your bailiwick. This is what you have thought through to say, you know what, Trailblazers is great, but I Am Black Success, because when you walked into that room with your child, that's what you saw.
I saw Black success.
You saw Black success. And why not highlight that with the name I Am Black Success when folks can now walk through the catalog, 3 years of catalog of folks that have been extremely successful. Yeah. Luminaries, as you said, from all across the world. The Sean Doves, the Sean Doves of the world, who lead people. And it was an interesting story. I would love, because Sean listens to the show. He's an avid listener to both of our shows. But before we close out, there's a story with Sean that that illuminates you and Trailblazers, because oftentimes one of the hardest things for us to do as entrepreneurs when we're building something new is to get backing, to have support. How did Sean support you in building up, right? Because it speaks to us as podcasters and our mindsets around that, and why we still need folks to, hey, as Sean says, we need midwives, to birth our dreams out into the world.
Sometimes you need that person to pull out what you can't push out on your own, right?
Yeah, that's it.
I met Sean Dove in March of 2016, about 6 weeks into podcasting. I was just starting to try and drive awareness. So I'm on Twitter one night, and I'm just following all these people. And I followed Sean, and a couple hours pass, and I get a Twitter DM from Sean that says, I've been looking for you for 6 months. And I was thinking, if I didn't find you, meaning I didn't find this show, I was going to have to create it myself. And Sean comes on the podcast as a guest in May of 2016. And he stood at the top of my top 5 for probably 18 months.
Wow.
And I want to share this with you. We were both at Podcast Movement a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
My very first Podcast Movement was in 2016. So I'm 6 months into podcasting. I was that newbie on the floor looking for anybody to pour into me. And I walked into a session, and it was about monetization. And somebody said, you can't get sponsorship unless you have 50,000 downloads a month. And Charles, at the time, I'm 6 months in. I didn't have a prior community. I didn't have, I had a vision, but I was probably seeing 1,000, 2,000 downloads a month, maybe.
That's amazing for a beginning podcast.
And so I leave Podcast Movement, and it could have been a couple weeks after that, Sean initially reached out to me and said, hey, are you looking for sponsorship? And I, in shame, heard what this person in the Podcast Movement discussion said. I said, Sean, no, I'm good. I'm good. And I dropped it because I was like, I can't tell him I'm only getting this much downloads per show, right? And so I leave that there, and January of 2017 rolls around, and I kid you not. I wouldn't even tell you I'm praying. I am driving on the highway to work. And I am like, God, I need some money. Right?
Yeah.
I need at the time I think it was like $10,000. I was like, God, I need $10,000 this year to offset editing the show.
Yeah.
And the hair on the back of my neck stands up every time I think about this. I sit at my desk that morning, and within an hour, this is January of 2017, I get an email from Sean Dove that says he was pissed. He was like, I just got done listening to this show that did a year in review. And anyone that knows Sean listens to a lot of podcasts.
Yes.
And he was listening to a leadership show, and they did a year in review of all the people that they had on the show in the prior year. Not a single person was a person of color.
Oh.
And Sean, in his message, says, Stephen, I am giving you $10,000 to create that episode. The episode, Charles. I just done have a conversation with God and say, yo, I need 10 grand for the year. And Sean, and I think I picked up the phone and called Sean right then, crying, right? Because I'm like, I done mess with God. Like, right? I'm like, Sean, this just happened, right? And this is your response. I will receive the 10 for the year, right? I will gladly create this episode. And that was the beginning of a 3-year partnership with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement and our partnership. And Sean continued to support the show. And it's been, from day one, has been one of the biggest champions of that program. It would not have happened or be where it is today without Sean.
Yeah. Yeah, Sean, it's interesting that you said earlier on that his show remained very highly rated. When he came on a couple of years ago, like it sat at number 1 for a long time, and I titled it How to Find Your Midwife. And it is a part of our distillation of how do you fulfill your revolution, and thinking about like that tenet right there, finding your midwives, finding your people that will help you birth your dreams out into the world. Because he said, it's not that we have a midlife crisis, is that we have a midwife crisis. And I think about so many people that support this show, and some people, and I think about my good friend, Dr. Travis Batts, who's my recurring guest, and how we talk about all the time how we're each other's midwives, how we pour into each other. If we think about I always try to think about themes of the show. We began this by you and I meeting and pouring into each other, finding our midwifery in our in our time at Podcast Movement. Yeah. We've talked about your father pouring into you, and I can always speak to Charles Jr. pouring into me. We talk about Sean Dove and the work that he's done with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement and how he's poured into so many folks. It is important to know that the work that we do and the impact that we make, dear brother, we don't do this alone.
No, we don't.
We don't do this alone. And that for us to be great, for us to be revolutionary, we must know that bootstrapping does not exist. That our community, that we were born into communities of people that have ancestral history that were built on communal engagement. Not independent engagement, but a communal engagement.
100%.
And for us to come together to be successful, we must think about how do we attract it? And then how do we give out to folks to make sure that we look around and say, you know what? We're building and imbibing and involving ourselves in communities that will uplift the values and principles that we see that we want to have illuminated in the world. And it's so important because if I think about I am Black success, what did it say? You can determine your success by the 5 people that are surrounded by you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You walk into rooms, you want to say, how did I get in this room with Ralph Sampson? How did I get in this room with Stephen A. Hart? How did I get in this room with B.K. Fulton? How did I get in this room with Muhammad Leela? It is because we began to say that I can give something to you. It was never about the ask. And I'm sure with Sean, and we talk about, you didn't ask Sean for anything.
No.
What you did was go looking for a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that if I brought you and Sean on the show, Sean would tell me the story about how much that you poured into him as much as he poured into you.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, look, he is the world's best connector.
Yes.
I mean, our friendship, was by way of Sean, and there are a dozen others.
Yeah.
And I realized going to Rumble, Young Man Rumble, I thought, hey, me and Sean got something. Sean's been pouring into me, and then there are 200 people in the room that say exactly what I felt about this brother. And that is who Sean Dove is.
That is who Sean Dove is.
To his core.
Yeah. Yeah. Revolutionaries, I want you to go check out StephenAHart.com, where you can find all about the podcast, his upcoming coursework, who this branding extraordinaire, superior, revolutionary is, and how you can get involved with his work. I know the course is coming. The personal branding course. We need to be able to tell our stories out to the world, and this brother will help you figure out how to tell that story most efficiently. And so I am tremendously grateful. StephenAHart.com. But I want to say thank you, because I have been looking forward to this conversation for so long, and meeting you in person last week at the recording of this. We were out in Denver, the middle of August of 2023, and the love and the ability to coalesce brothers, who are going to continue to do great things. You're doing amazing things for us and for me. And I just want to say thank you for being the revolution that we all need to see.
I am grateful to you. I appreciate you. I thank you for continuing to do this work that you're doing, and looking forward to what evolves from our time there. We have some work to do. That, I've had a good feeling about for some time. So I'm excited. I encourage your community to connect. Hit me up. Let me know, how I can pour into you. And appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. But also make sure that you are filling up your own cup, because we can pour.
I can't pour from an empty cup.
Can't pour from an empty cup. Make sure, revolutionaries, that you are taking. We started this conversation. Take care of your health. Go to see your doctors. Eat well. Sleep. As my good friend Sonali out in Tulsa says, figure out how you can biohack your life, because we trying to be here.
Yeah.
And look, and we trying to keep this look.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? We trying to keep this look. Revolutionaries, you know that I love you, and that we are here for you, and we want you to be able to answer what we think is the most thought-provoking question of your life. What's your revolution? Go out into the world, right? Do your thing. Find your people. Find your community. We'll see you next time. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.